This is Shelby Paget. You might see me on Instagram, Ginger969. I've also been able to participate in some of the shootouts with Vital MX this year, riding all the 2018 450 and 250Fs, which has been an awesome experience, and which will really come invaluable for giving you guys the best perspective I can give you as kind of your average track guy, and what it's like to jump onto the all-new Alta Redshift MX. So for those of you that have been following them like me, the company started out in 2013, and I've been following their technology since then, when they used to be called BRD. So they've progressed over the years. I guess it's almost about 5 years now, and they've come out with what they think is a very competitive platform to introduce into the 250F racing scene. So they've been making some strides with Josh Hill, Chris Kiefer, some of the big names in the sport. They just landed their first, I believe, enduro cross rider this last month too, so that'll be kind of cool to follow how they've done. So just a couple quick features actually from their website about the bike. The bike has an equivalent of 40 horsepower, 120 foot-pounds of torque. So the thing with the electric bikes, and why I'm so fascinated with the whole EV movement, I guess, in automobiles and motorcycles, is the fact that you get instant torque, instant max torque on demand. So you're able to tune the power curve with a computer or laptop software. I think that moving to an EV platform is kind of a similar transition for motocross. I grew up riding two-strokes and grew up on a Z50 when I was, 3 years old. So I've been through all of the traditional ways of riding. So had a two-stroke growing up racing, and then transitioned to the four-strokes in 2004, on board with the RMZ 250 at first. So a lot of changes over the years in the sport in general. You've got the next trend or next wave of technology affecting our sport now, and that's electric vehicles or EV movement. So what you're able to do with these electric motors is incredible. The power output, like I said, 120 foot-pounds of torque. You've got I'm not sure what this means, 2.5 240 volt recharge, so maybe 2.5 hours for recharge. I could be wrong. Feel free to comment and address that if I'm off. And the weight of the vehicle is 267. So, you're looking at quite a bit more weight than your typical 450, but you've also got to keep in mind this doesn't have any rotating mass, it does, but it's not the same effect that you have in a typical gas engine. So when you're looking at the way the bike operates, you've got no gears to shift through, so there's no latency. You've got a whole shot machine basically, because you can just take off with instant torque all the way to the first corner without having to shift through gears, without having to feather a clutch, and without having to really finagle with the bike. You just go. And I think that's kind of going to be an interesting thing for me to check out today. This is literally my first time on this bike, and I'm going to go to a local track that I ride all the time. I've ridden my 250 there, I've ridden 125s, 150s, 250Fs, and my recent 450 out there. So I've got a good idea of how bikes work out there and what it's like to ride them. So like I said, I'm nothing crazy. I'm your pretty standard track guy. I'm 31 years old, weigh 155 pounds, and run maybe an intermediate pace on a good day. So my goal today is just kind of give you an idea of what it's like to come from a place of being as unbiased as possible, since I love dirt bikes. I love two-stroke, I love four-strokes, the technology that's been incorporated in the sport over the last 15 years or so. And so I see this as another opportunity to figure out how this is going to further develop motocross and enable more folks to have access to the sport, and hopefully on a large scale get some more money in the sport overall, so that we can continue to grow the industry and make it something that is more obtainable for the masses. So since four strokes came out, that's been somewhat of a sticky point, is the cost to get involved. And the EV bikes, they're expensive. They're let's see what they have it listed on their websites, $10,495. So they're not cheap. But this is the first rendition, first release of this type of motorcycle. So just like most things, when you start going through distribution and increasing units produced, the cost to produce that goes down, as well as recouping whatever they spend on R&D to produce the high performance batteries and motors. So keep that in mind. And also, you don't have to change oil. There's no air filters to change. Your maintenance is pretty much your tires and brakes and suspension. So those things require a lot less attention than, you know, your typical gas bike with the air filter, motor oil, oil filters, adjusting the valves, checking the timing, things like that. So
alright, so first laps, I'm just going to try it on map 1, get used to the bike. Literally my first time riding this thing on the dirt, so I'm gonna run map 4.
Did you hear me?
Just got back from riding the Alta for the first time out at the track. The conditions were great. The dirt was nice and wet. Just rained yesterday. It was over 40 today, so that's pretty good weather for Boise in January. Pretty loamy and sand-like, kind of some deep areas, and it's probably a good place to put this thing to the test in terms of torque and power, just because a lot of 250Fs and 125 and 252 strokes tend to have to be held pretty wide open just to get around the track at a decent pace. So initially getting on the bike, as you can see from the GoPro footage, I mean, it feels really natural. The ergos are really good. They're right on point. One area that I thought took a little bit of getting used to, I don't know if it's just me or what, but I felt like the foot pegs were just a little bit too far maybe forward. I kept slipping my foot off the foot pegs in the corners after coming in under braking or acceleration out. So maybe I just need to adjust where the brake pedal is or something like that. But that was a little weird when I was on the higher power level. So I tried all the maps. Map 1 is definitely really restricted. It's kind of like riding a base 125 in a sand track, so it's never really going to get away from you. Still has power and torque, I switched it over to map 3, which is actually the second fastest map for some reason. They're out of order. And you get a little more drive out of the corners. It's definitely noticeable. And then map 2 gets progressively better in terms of power delivery. And then the last moto I did was map 4. Map 4 is explosive. It's like riding a high-powered 250F, one of the newer, maybe YZF or even potentially a KTM 250 SXF. But the power delivery is different. It's not as, I'd say, consistent. There's still a little bit of areas where, though the power delivery is smooth and progressive, it still has some abruptness to it, and that's probably just in the mapping. So I think that's something that would be easy to iron out. And it's probably mapped a little different too for more of a tacky track versus a wet sand track. So the power was impressive. I wasn't disappointed at all coming out of corners. It would pull out just like a strong 250F would. And I did have to get adjusted to braking into the corners. When you let off or chop the throttle, it doesn't act like a typical 4-stroke or 2-stroke might. It's more like a 2-stroke, but it's just different. So you kind of have to adjust to the way that you jump into a rut, maybe like on a slippery off-camber downhill into a corner. As you might see in the video, I was a little bit hesitant into fully committing into that section yet, but I think with a little more time on the bike, I'll get used to it and it'll be comfortable. But everything else was really fun. The suspension is the weak point. If you could put some Showa stuff or SSS forks or maybe just a gold cone valve kit on these 4CSs or the new AER forks, it would be 1,000 times better and inspire a lot more confidence on the jump sections, because I was getting a lot of bounce no matter what I did with the adjustments on the compression and rebound. It's just not complementing to the bike's weight or just good suspension in general. So the 4CS, is kind of known for some quirks, and I think if you put a different suspension setup on this, or maybe the internals swapped out or updated, it could be a really good handling bike. And it does handle great. The corners are amazing. It's effortless. You jump into a rut and it just goes. You don't have to shift, you don't have to clutch, you just ride the bike. So you don't feel the weight in the corners. You don't really feel the weight anywhere except for when you come up short on a jump or over jump something. And that seems to be partly in combination with probably the suspension too. But you don't feel the weight like you would expect until you're unloading or if you tip over. So everything on the bike was easy to get used to. I'm excited to take it out again and do some grass tracks out here while the ground's still wet and see what it can do. It sounds like, or feels like it'll turn real well, and I'm still getting comfortable, so I'd like to explore kind of where I can go on this thing and how much fun I can have on it. So hope you enjoyed the video. Post comment questions down below. I probably forgot a lot of information, but hopefully I gave you enough of an overview as to kind of what this is like. It's just different. So if you're looking to get into demoing one of these, I highly suggest it. Moto 1 in Nampa, they offer a demo like this one, so hit them up if you're local. If not, see where your local Alta dealer is, and this is definitely going to be the future, in my opinion, just like 4-strokes were when we were coming around in the late 90s and early 2000s. So get on board early and figure out what you like, what you don't like, and help them progress the development quicker. So in regards to the power, there's areas of it coming out of a corner where it feels like a modded 250F or maybe a slow 450, I guess you could say. And there's kind of like the turn-in, it feels lighter than a 450 would for sure. Similar to a 250F that's real well balanced and set up. And that's without this suspension being super good on it, or set for me exactly. So if you were to sort that out and have this bike set up for you as a rider, I think the turning capabilities would be far better than most of the bikes out there.